I held the white lace of my wedding dress against my skin and smiled at my reflection. In just 2 weeks, I was supposed to marry Dominic Halvern. I had spent 5 years loving him, supporting him, and dreaming of our life together. The cake samples on the table looked delicious, and for a second, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Then the door to the boutique swung open. Dominic walked in, but he wasn't smiling. My stepsister Fina was clinging to his arm. She looked at me with a nasty smirk that made my blood run cold. "Dominic? What are you doing here?" I asked, my heart starting to race. Dominic didn't even look me in the eye. He pulled a thick white envelope out of his jacket and tossed it onto the table next to my wedding cake. "The wedding is off, Evelyn," he said. His voice was as cold as ice. "I'm marrying Fina instead. We're moving the date up to next week." I felt like the floor had vanished beneath my feet. "What? You're joking, right? We've been together for 5 years. Fina stepped forward and patted her stomach. She held up a small, black and white photo. It was an ultrasound. "It's not a joke, Evelyn. I'm pregnant. Dominic needs to be with a woman who can actually give him a family, not a girl who spends all her time crying over a dying father." "You're a monster," I whispered, looking at the man I thought I knew. "I'm a businessman," Dominic snapped. "That envelope is your severance package. It's enough to cover 1 month of your father's hospital bills if you're smart. Consider yourself lucky. Oh, and Marguerite already changed the locks on the house. Your bags are at the dump." They turned and walked out, leaving me standing there in a wedding dress I would never wear, holding an envelope that was supposed to pay for my father's life. I was homeless, broke, and betrayed. But as I stood there in the rain outside the shop, a black limousine pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down just an inch. I didn't know it yet, but Alistair Brain was watching, and he was about to change everything. The smell of vanilla and sugar used to be my favorite thing in the world, but as I stood in the center of Ever After Bridal, that sweet smell started to make me feel sick. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dress was perfect. It was a floor-length silk gown with tiny pearls sewn into the bodice. It cost more than my car, but Dominic had insisted on the best. "You look like a queen, Evelyn," the shop lady whispered as she adjusted my veil. I smiled, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. I was exhausted. My father, Edmund, had been in the hospital for 3 months. His heart was failing, and the medical bills were piling up like a mountain. But every time I felt like giving up, I thought of Dominic. He was my rock. We had been together since college, 5 years of late-night study dates, 5 years of building his business from the ground up, and 5 years of promising to grow old together. 2 weeks, I whispered to my reflection. In 2 weeks, I'll be Mrs. Dominic Halvern. The bell above the boutique door chimed. I turned, expecting to see my stepmother, Margaret. She was supposed to help me pick out the shoes. But it wasn't Margaret. It was Dominic. And he wasn't alone. My stepsister, Fina, was walking so close to him that their arms were locked together. She was wearing a tight red dress and a look on her face that I didn't like. It was a look of victory. "Dominic? What are you doing here?" I laughed nervously, clutching the sides of my white dress. "You know it's bad luck to see the bride in her dress before the wedding." Dominic didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was a bug he wanted to squash under his shoe. He reached into his expensive suit jacket and pulled out a thick white envelope. He walked over and tossed it onto the table, right next to the plate of cake samples I had been tasting. "The wedding is off, Evelyn," he said. His voice was flat and cold. The air left my lungs. "What? Is this a joke?" "Because it's not funny, Dominic." "I don't joke about my life," he snapped. He finally looked at me, but his eyes were full of disgust. "I'm marrying Fina. We're moving the date up to next week. All the arrangements you made, the flowers, the hall, the music, we're keeping them. It saves us the trouble of planning from scratch." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. I reached out for the edge of the table to keep from falling. My mind was spinning. Fina? My stepsister who had always hated me? The girl who spent my father's money while I worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on? "You can't be serious," I choked out. 5 years, Dominic. I helped you start your company. I stayed up all night doing your accounting when you couldn't afford a staff. We were a team. Fina stepped forward then. She reached out and touched the lace on my sleeve with a fake pout. "Oh, Evelyn, always so dramatic. A team? You were a secretary with a fancy title. Dominic needs a real woman by his side, someone with class, someone with a future." She leaned in closer, and then she did something that broke my heart into a million pieces. She picked up a small grainy piece of paper from her purse and held it up to my face. It was an ultrasound photo. "I'm pregnant, Evelyn," Fina whispered, though the whole shop could hear her. "Dominic is going to be a father. He needs a family. He doesn't need a girl who spends every cent on a dying old man in a hospital bed. Your father is a lost cause. Why should Dominic waste his life waiting for you to stop grieving?" I looked at Dominic, hoping to see a spark of shame in his eyes. But there was nothing. "Is it true?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It's true," Dominic said. He pointed to the white envelope on the table. "That's your severance package. There's $50,000 in there. It's more than you're worth. But I wanted to be generous. It should cover your father's hospital bills for a month. Maybe 2 if you move him to a cheaper ward." "You're buying me off?" I whispered. "You're dumping me for my sister and then giving me a check like I'm an employee? You're firing?" "You are fired, Evelyn," Fina giggled. "From his life. And from the house. Marguerite already went over there. She's moving my things into your room right now. Your old clothes and those dusty books, they're already at the city dump. Don't bother going back." "That house belongs to my father," I screamed, the tears finally bursting from my eyes. "Not anymore," Dominic said. "Your father signed the power of attorney over to Marguerite months ago when he got sick. She sold the house to me this morning. It's my property now, and I don't want you on it." I looked down at the white silk of my dress. It felt like it was burning me. I reached behind my back, fumbling with the zipper. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't move. "Here, let me help you," Fina said. She grabbed the lace of the bodice and pulled. The sound of the silk ripping was the loudest thing I had ever heard. The pearls scattered across the floor like tiny white tears. I scrambled to hold the fabric up against my chest, feeling completely naked and humiliated in front of the shop workers who were all staring at me. "There," Fina said, dusting off her hands. "Now it matches your life, broken." Dominic turned toward the door. "Don't contact me again, Evelyn. Take the money and go. If I see you near Fina or my house, I'll have the police arrest you for trespassing." They walked out together. I watched through the glass window as Dominic opened the door of his sports car for her. He had bought that car with the bonus I helped him earn last year. They drove away, splashing rainwater onto the sidewalk. I stood there in the middle of the shop, clutching my ripped dress, surrounded by white pearls and the smell of vanilla cake. The shop owner walked over, but she didn't offer a hug. She looked at the ripped dress with a frown. "You'll have to pay for the damage to that gown, honey," she said coldly. I grabbed the white envelope from the table. My knuckles were white. I didn't say a word. I walked into the changing room, stripped off the ruined silk, and put on my old jeans and a faded sweater. I walked out of the store and into the pouring rain. The sky was gray and angry, matching the fire starting to burn in my chest. I walked 3 blocks until I reached a trash can. I looked at the envelope in my hand. $50,000. It was a fortune. It was the money that could keep my father on a ventilator for another few weeks. I hated Dominic. I hated Fina. But I loved my father. I tucked the envelope into my jacket, gritting my teeth. I didn't have a car anymore. I didn't have a home. I had nothing but a dying father and a heart full of glass. I started walking toward the hospital, my shoes soaking through with cold water. As I crossed the street, a massive black limousine slowed down next to me. It was a beautiful car, the kind only the richest people in the city owned. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. It followed me slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. I stopped and turned toward the car, my temper finally snapping. "What do you want?" I shouted into the rain. "Haven't I been kicked enough today?" The back window rolled down just 2 inches. I couldn't see the man's face, but I saw his hand. He was wearing a silver watch that probably cost more than the house I just lost. "Evelyn Alistair," a deep, smooth voice said from the shadows of the car. It was a voice that sounded like velvet and power. "You're a long way from home." I froze. "How do you know my name?" I know everything about you, the man said. I know your fiancé is a coward. I know your stepsister is a thief. And I know your father is dying because you can't afford the best doctors. Who are you? I demanded, wiping the rain from my eyes. Someone who can give you the one thing Dominic Halvern can't, the man replied. And what's that? The window rolled down further. For a split second, I saw a pair of piercing blue eyes and a jawline that looked like it was carved from marble. He was the most handsome man I had ever seen, but he looked tired, like he was carrying the weight of the world. Revenge, he said. Get in the car, Evelyn. Let's go save your father. I looked at the dark interior of the limo, then back at the cold, empty street. I had nothing left to lose. I opened the door and stepped inside. The door clicked shut, locking out the sound of the rain. I didn't know it then, but the girl who walked into that bridal shop that morning was dead. And the woman sitting next to the most powerful billionaire in the country was just getting started. The inside of the limousine was as quiet as a tomb. The air smelled like expensive leather and a hint of sandalwood. I sat as far away from the man as possible, my wet clothes soaking into the plush gray seat. I felt small, broken, and terrified, but the anger in my chest kept me from shaking. The man in the shadows didn't speak for a long time. He just watched the city lights blur past the window. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. He wasn't just handsome. He looked powerful, like the kind of person who could end a company with a single phone call. This was Alistair Brain. I had seen his face on the cover of business magazines, usually with titles like The Reclusive King of Tech or The Man Who Owns the City. Why are you helping me? I finally whispered. My voice sounded thin and weak in the silent car. Alistair turned his head. His blue eyes seemed to glow in the dark. Because I hate waste, Evelyn. And watching a man like Dominic Halvern throw away a woman like you is a waste I can't ignore. You don't even know me, I snapped. I know you spent 5 years building his empire while he spent his nights at clubs. I know you've been sleeping in a hospital chair for 3 weeks to save money on gas. And I know that right now, you have exactly $12 in your bank account because Marguerite emptied your savings today. I gasped. I hadn't even checked my banking app yet. A fresh wave of panic hit me. She took my savings? That was my father's medication money. She has the power of attorney, Alistair said calmly. To the bank, she is your father. She can do whatever she wants. I put my face in my hands and sobbed. I couldn't help it. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the pregnancy, the homelessness, and now the theft was too much. I was drowning. Suddenly, a warm, heavy hand rested on my shoulder. It didn't feel like a predatory touch. It felt like an anchor. Don't cry, Alistair said. His voice was lower now, almost a growl. Crying is for the weak. We are going to make them regret the day they ever heard the name Evelyn Alistair. He tapped a button on the intercom. Drake, pull over at the St. Jude Medical Center and call Dr. Tobias. Tell him if he even thinks about moving Edmund Alistair to a general ward, I will buy his hospital and fire him by midnight. Yes, sir, a voice replied from the front. I looked at Alistair in shock. You'd do that? Why? I told you, he said, leaning back into the shadows. I'm giving you revenge. But first, I'm giving you security. You can't fight a war if you're worrying about where to sleep. The car pulled up to the hospital. Usually, I had to walk 3 blocks from the bus stop in the rain, but the limo drove right up to the private entrance. As the door opened, Drake, a tall man in a sharp suit, held an umbrella over my head. Wait, I said, turning back to Alistair. What's the catch? Men like you don't do things for free. Alistair looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something human in his eyes. A flash of pain. He pressed a hand to his chest for a second, his knuckles turning white, before he regained his cool expression. You're right, he said. There is a catch. I need a wife. My mother is determined to marry me off to a woman who only wants my money and my name. I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything. You want me to marry you? I stumbled over the words. A contract, he corrected. 1 year. I give you the resources to destroy Dominic and Marguerite. I save your father's life. In exchange, you occupy the seat next to me at galas and board meetings. You keep the vultures away. I just got out of a 5-year nightmare, I said, shivering. I don't know if I can do this. Think about it, Alistair said as Drake nudged me toward the hospital doors. But remember, Evelyn, Dominic and Finna are having their engagement party tonight at the Halvern estate, your old home. While you're sitting in a cold hospital hallway, they are drinking champagne in your father's garden. That was the spark that did it. The thought of Finna laughing in my father's favorite rose garden made my blood boil. I'll do it, I said, my voice suddenly firm. Alistair nodded once. Drake will stay with you. He has a new phone for you and the keys to a suite at the Grand. Tomorrow morning, your new life begins. The limo pulled away, leaving me standing at the hospital entrance. I turned and walked inside, but I didn't feel like the broken girl in the ripped dress anymore. When I reached my father's room, I saw Dr. Tobias, the man who had been threatening to kick us out for weeks, standing outside the door. He was sweating and looking at his phone with a terrified expression. "Miss Alistair," he squeaked when he saw me. I was just coming to check on your father. Wonderful news. We've decided to move him to the executive suite. Top floor. Best equipment. All expenses covered by a private donor." I looked at Drake, who was standing behind me like a silent guardian. Drake simply nodded. "Move him now," I said to the doctor. My voice sounded different. It sounded like authority. As they wheeled my father's bed toward the elevator, I looked out the window. In the distance, I could see the lights of the Halvern estate. I could almost hear the music from their party. "Enjoy your night, Dominic," I thought, clutching the new phone Alistair's man had given me. "Because it's the last night you'll ever feel safe." I spent the night by my father's side in the new luxury suite. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of the morning. I fell asleep in a soft leather armchair, dreaming of fire and falling empires. The next morning, a knock on the door woke me up. It was Drake. He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a team of 3 women carrying garment bags and makeup kits. "Mr. Sprain says it's time to go to work," Drake said. "Work? I don't have a job," I said, rubbing my eyes. "You do now," Drake replied with a small smile. "You are the new creative director of Brain International's design wing, and your first meeting is in 2 hours." I stood up, my heart hammering. "But Dominic's company is trying to win the contract for Brain International's new headquarters. If I'm the director, then you are the one who decides if he succeeds or fails," Drake finished. I looked at the garment bag as one of the women unzipped it. Inside was a power suit in a deep, midnight blue. It was sharp, professional, and looked like armor. I spent the next hour being transformed. They did my hair in a sleek high ponytail. They did my makeup so my eyes looked piercing and cold. When I stood in front of the full-length mirror, I didn't recognize myself. I looked like a woman who could move mountains. I looked like a woman who could break hearts. "One more thing," Drake said. He handed me a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside was a diamond ring so large it looked like a piece of ice. "Mr. Brain said you should wear this to the office. It's better to let people wonder than to let them ask." I slipped the ring onto my finger. It was heavy. It felt like a promise. We arrived at the Brain International skyscraper an hour later. The building was a giant needle of glass and steel. As I walked through the lobby, people stopped and stared. They didn't know who I was, but they could see the way I carried myself. They could see the ring. I was led to the top floor, into a boardroom with a massive mahogany table. A group of executives sat there looking confused. And there, at the far end of the table, sat Dominic. He was wearing his best suit, looking smug and confident. He was laughing at a joke one of the other men made. He hadn't seen me yet. "Ah, good," one of the executives said. "Our new creative director is here. We can begin the pitch for the Halvern project." Dominic stood up, his charming smile ready. "Thank you, gentlemen. I've put a lot of work into this design." He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes landed on me. His jaw literally dropped. His face went from tan to a sickly shade of gray in 3 seconds. "Evelyn?" he gasped. "What are you doing here? You can't be here. This is a private meeting." I walked to the head of the table and pulled out the leather chair. I sat down slowly, crossing my legs and leaning back. I looked at him, letting the silence stretch until he started to sweat. "Actually, Dominic," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous, "I'm the one who decides if you get to stay in this room. And right now, I'm leaning toward no." I looked down at his design proposal on the table and flicked it with my finger like it was a piece of trash. Is this the best you can do? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. Because it looks exactly like the work I did for you 3 years ago. Do you even have an original thought in your head? Or do you just steal everything from the women in your life? The other executives looked at each other, then at Dominic, who looked like he was about to explode with rage. You can't do this, he hissed. I'll talk to Alistair Brain himself. He'll fire you for this. Just then, the double doors at the back of the room opened. Alistair walked in. He didn't look at the executives. He didn't look at the papers. He walked straight over to me and placed a hand on the back of my chair. Is there a problem, darling? Alistair asked, his voice echoing through the room. Dominic's eyes went wide as he looked at Alistair's hand, then at the massive diamond ring on my finger. He looked like he was going to faint. Dominic was just leaving, I said, smiling at my ex-fiancée. He realized his work isn't up to our standards. Alistair looked at Dominic like he was a piece of dirt on his shoe. You heard her. Get out. As Dominic stumbled out of the room, tripping over his own briefcase, I felt a rush of power I had never known. This was only the beginning. He had taken my home and my heart, but I was going to take his world. The silence in the boardroom after Dominic scurried out was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the air had finally been cleared of a foul smell. The other executives were staring at me with a mix of fear and deep curiosity. They didn't know who I was, but they knew who Alistair Brain was, and Alistair was currently standing behind me like a protective shadow. Gentlemen, Alistair said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Miss Alistair will be reviewing all pending contracts. If she says a firm is substandard, they are blacklisted. Do I make myself clear? A chorus of frantic yes sirs filled the room. Alistair looked down at me. My office, now. I stood up, my legs feeling a bit like jelly, but I kept my head high. I followed him through a private door that led into a massive office. It was all glass, overlooking the entire city. It felt like being on top of the world. As soon as the door clicked shut, Alistair's posture changed. He didn't look like the king of tech anymore. He sat down heavily in his chair and squeezed his eyes shut. His face went pale, and for a second I saw his hand tremble as he reached for a small bottle of pills in his desk drawer. Alistair? I stepped forward, worried. Are you okay? He swallowed a pill and took a deep breath. When he opened his eyes, the cold, powerful mask was back in place, but I could see the fatigue behind it. I'm fine. Just a long morning. Sit. I sat across from him. Dominic is going to go straight to my stepmother. She'll know I'm working for you. She'll try to fight back. Let her, Alistair said. He leaned forward. You handled yourself well in there, but that was just a skirmish. The real war is about Marguerite, or should I say, Ophelia? I blinked. Who is Ophelia? That's for later, Alistair replied, waving a hand. Right now, you need a win that belongs to you, not just my shadow. You are the creative director, but you need an army. I've assigned Cressida to be your lead manager. She's tough. She knows where the bodies are buried, and most importantly, she hates Dominic Halvern as much as you do. He handed me a folder. This is your first real task. Brain International is hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. It's for the Hospital Foundation. Every major player in the city will be there, including Marguerite, Fina, and Dominic. My heart skipped a beat. You want me to face them again? So soon? I want you to humiliate them, Alistair corrected. They think you're a homeless girl in a ripped dress. They don't know you're the woman holding the keys to their future. You'll attend as my guest, but during the day, you will run this office. Show them you aren't just a face, Evelyn. Show them you're a force. I left his office and was immediately met by Cressida. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful. She looked me up and down, then smiled, a sharp, hungry smile. So you're the one who made Dominic Halvern cry in the hallway, she said. I like you already. He tried to hit on me at a conference last year. I told him I'd rather date a cactus. I laughed, a real genuine laugh. Nice to meet you, Cressida. Come on, she said, leading me down a hall of cubicles where everyone was whispering. We have work to do. Dominic's company, Halvern Designs, actually owes us $3 million in back rent for the office space they lease in one of our smaller buildings. He's been dodging the payments. I stopped walking. He's been dodging payments? But he just bought a new sports car and a 5-carat ring for Fina. Cressida smirked. Exactly. He's using company money as his personal piggy bank, and since you're the director now, you have the power to sign the eviction notice. I felt a thrill of cold joy. Show me where to sign. We spent the afternoon working. I realized I was actually good at this. For years I had done the work while Dominic took the credit. I knew the numbers, I knew the designs, and I knew exactly where his weaknesses were. By 5 p.m., I had not only signed his eviction notice, but also blocked his company from 3 other major bids in the city. As I was packing up my bag, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered it. Evelyn, you little thief. It was Marguerite's voice, screeching so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. How dare you show your face at Brain International? I don't know whose bed you crawled into to get that job, but you're finished. I'm going to the police. I'm telling them you stole jewelry from the house before you left. Go ahead, Marguerite, I said, my voice incredibly calm. But before you go to the police, you might want to check the front door of your office. There's an eviction notice taped to it. You have 24 hours to get out. Oh, and give Dominic my best. Tell him I hope Fina likes sleeping in a tent. I hung up before she could scream again. I felt amazing. But then, I saw Drake standing at my office door. He looked worried. Ms. Alistair, there's a problem at the hospital, he said. My heart dropped. Is it my father? No, he's stable, but Dr. Tobias is being difficult. He's refusing to sign the release for your father's new medication. He says he needs authorization from your stepmother because she holds the medical power of attorney. Alistair said he'd handle the doctor. I cried, grabbing my coat. He tried, Drake said, walking me toward the elevator. But Margaret is smart. She threatened to sue the hospital for kidnapping if they didn't follow her orders. Dr. Tobias is a coward. He's scared of her. Take me there, I said. Now. We arrived at the hospital in record time. I didn't wait for Drake to open the door. I ran inside and headed straight for the executive wing. I found Dr. Tobias in the hallway, talking to someone I didn't expect to see. It was Ophelia Carrington. At least, that's what the name tag on her expensive suit said. But as she turned around, I realized it was Marguerite. She was wearing a wig and glasses, looking completely different, but I knew those eyes. Marguerite, I gasped. What are you doing? She looked at me with a cold, mocking smile. I don't know what you're talking about, girl. My name is Ophelia Carrington. I am the legal representative for the Alistair estate, and I am here to ensure that Edmund Alistair is moved to a more appropriate facility. She pointed to a gurney being pushed by 2 orderlies. My father was on it. He looked so frail, his eyes closed, tubes connected to his chest. You're moving him? I shouted. The doctor said he can't be moved. It will kill him. He's being moved to a hospice center in the countryside, Margaret said, her voice dropping the Ophelia act for a second. It's very quiet, very isolated. No one will bother him there, especially not you. Stop. I blocked the gurney, my hands shaking. Dr. Tobias, you know this is wrong. He's in heart failure. Dr. Tobias looked at the floor. I'm sorry, Miss Alistair. I have to follow the legal guardian's instructions. The paperwork is in order. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, expecting Alistair, but it was Drake. He whispered in my ear, Alistair is on the phone with the board of directors. Hold them for 2 minutes. I looked at Margaret. She was smirking, knowing she had won. She reached out to push me aside, but I grabbed her wrist. Listen to me, Ophelia, I hissed. I don't know what game you're playing with this fake name, but if my father dies because of this move, I won't just sue you. I will spend every second of the rest of my life making sure you rot in a cage. Big words for a girl with no house, Marguerite laughed. Orderlies, move him. The elevator doors at the end of the hall opened with a loud ding. Alistair Brain stepped out. He wasn't alone. He was followed by 4 men in dark suits and a woman carrying a legal briefcase. He didn't look sick anymore. He looked like an avenging angel. Dr. Tobias, Alistair said, his voice booming in the quiet hallway. I believe you're familiar with the state medical board. The doctor turned white. Mr. Brain, This is Sarah Jenkins, Alistair said, gesturing to the woman with the briefcase. She is a judge, and she just signed an emergency injunction. Due to evidence of financial elder abuse, Marguerite Alastair's power of attorney has been suspended effective immediately. Marguerite's jaw dropped. You can't do that. I'm his wife. Actually, the judge said, stepping forward, we did a quick search on Ophelia Carrington. It turns out Ophelia is still legally married to a man in another state, which means her marriage to Edmund Alastair is bigamous and therefore void. I looked at Marguerite. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. Her face twisted in rage, and she lunged at me, but Drake stepped in front of me, catching her arms easily. Get her out of here, Alastair commanded. As security led a screaming Marguerite away, Alastair walked over to my father's gurney. He looked at the orderlies. Take him back to his room, and get the specialist in here, now. He turned to me. I was shaking so hard I couldn't stand. I felt my knees give out, but Alastair caught me. He pulled me into his chest, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely safe. It's okay, Evelyn, he whispered into my hair. He's safe. You're safe. I pulled back and looked at him. How did you find out about the other marriage? Alastair gave a small, tired smile. I told you, Evelyn. I know where the bodies are buried. Now, go be with your father. Tomorrow we have a gala to attend, and I think it's time the world met my future wife. I watched him walk away, noticing that he was leaning slightly on the wall as he turned the corner. He was saving my world. But who was saving his? The night was long, but it was the first time I didn't feel like a victim. I sat by my father's bedside in the executive suite. The machines hummed a steady rhythmic song that promised he was still with me. Outside, the city was a sea of lights, and somewhere in that sea, Marguerite was likely screaming at her lawyers. I looked at the diamond on my finger. It caught the dim light of the hospital monitors, throwing tiny rainbows against the wall. I wasn't just Evelyn Alastair anymore. I was a weapon. Around 2 a.m., the door pushed open. I expected Drake, but it was Alastair. He had changed out of his suit and into a simple black sweater. Without the armor of his expensive clothing, he looked younger, but his face was deathly pale. He's looking better, Alastair said, nodding toward my father. The new medication is working, I whispered. Thank you, Alastair. Truly. He sat in the chair across from me. For a moment, we just sat in the silence. Then he winced, his hand instinctively flying to his chest. He gripped his shirt, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Alastair, I jumped up and knelt beside him. What's wrong? Should I call the nurses? No, he hissed through gritted teeth. Just give it a minute. It's the stress. I didn't believe him. I reached out and took his hand. His skin was clammy. You're doing all this for me, but you're hurting. Why didn't you tell me you were this sick? He waited until the pain seemed to pass, then leaned his head back against the wall. Because in my world, sickness is a death sentence. My board of directors is like a pack of wolves. If they smell blood, they'll tear the company apart. My mother, Beatrice, she's the leader of the pack. She wants to replace me with a cousin she can control. He looked at me, his blue eyes intense. That's why I need you, Evelyn. I need the world to see me as a man with a future. A man getting married. A man who isn't dying. I won't let them take it from you, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Then tomorrow is the most important night of our lives, he said. The gala. Dr. Tobias is going to be there. So is Marguerite. They think they can still win. We're going to show them they've already lost. The next day at the office was a whirlwind. Cressida was like a drill sergeant. She had me reviewing every single one of Dominic's past projects. Look here, she said, pointing to a blueprint for a shopping mall Dominic had designed last year. These structural supports are identical to a project in Dubai from 10 years ago. He didn't design this. He copied it and changed the font. He's been doing this for years, I realized, a cold knot forming in my stomach. And because I was the one doing the actual math to make his stolen designs work, he never got caught. Well, he's about to get caught, Cressida said. I've sent these to the ethics board. By the time the gala starts tonight, his professional license will be under investigation. Around noon, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Miss Alastair? This is the nursing station. We have a situation. A Dr. Tobias is here with a group of men. They claim they have a court order to take your father for emergency testing at a private lab. Don't let them touch him, I shouted, grabbing my purse. I'm coming right now. I raced to the hospital, calling Alistair on the way, but he didn't answer. Drake wasn't answering either. I felt a surge of panic. Was I on my own? I burst into the executive wing and found Dr. Tobias standing by my father's bed. He was holding a needle. Two burly men in suits were standing by the door, blocking the nurses from entering. "Get away from him!" I screamed. Dr. Tobias looked up, his eyes twitching. "Evelyn, stay back. This is for his own good. We found a complication. We need to run a blood panel immediately." "You're lying," I said, stepping closer. "You're working for Marguerite. What's in that needle?" "It's a sedative," he said, his voice shaking. "We need him calm for the transport." I looked at the heart monitor. My father's heart rate was spiking. He was awake, his eyes wide with terror, but he couldn't speak because of the tubes. He was trapped in his own body, watching this man try to hurt him. Something inside me snapped. I didn't wait for a billionaire to save me. I didn't wait for a lawyer. I grabbed a heavy glass water pitcher from the bedside table and slammed it onto the floor. The glass shattered with a deafening crack. "The police are on their way." I lied, my voice booming. "I recorded everything you just said on my phone. If you touch him with that needle, you're going to jail for attempted murder." The two men by the door looked at each other, nervous. They were just hired muscle. They didn't want a murder charge. "She's bluffing," Dr. Tobias hissed. "Grab her." One of the men stepped toward me. I backed up against the wall, looking for another weapon. But just as his hand reached for my arm, the door flew open. It wasn't Alistair. It was a group of uniformed police officers led by Thaddeus, a man I recognized as Alistair's head of security. "Drop the syringe, Doctor," Thaddeus commanded, his gun drawn. Dr. Tobias dropped the needle like it was on fire. He fell to his knees, blubbering. "She made me do it! Marguerite! She said she'd pay off my gambling debts. Please, don't shoot." The police moved in, cuffing the doctor and his thugs. I rushed to my father's side, taking his hand. "It's okay, Dad. I've got you. They can't hurt you anymore." Thaddeus walked over to me. "Mr. Brain sent us as soon as he got the alert. He apologized for the delay. He had a medical episode at the office." "Is he okay?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "He's stable, but he insists on seeing you at the gala tonight. He said to tell you the trap is set." That evening, the transformation was complete. Cressida had sent a team to my hotel suite with a dress that looked like it was made of liquid gold. It was off the shoulder, hugging every curve, with a slit up the side that showed off my heels. When I arrived at the gala, the flashing lights of the paparazzi were blinding. I stepped out of the car, and for a second, the world went quiet. "Is that Evelyn Alistair?" I heard someone whisper. "The girl Dominic dumped? She looks like a goddess." I walked up the red carpet alone, my head held high. Inside the ballroom, the room was filled with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. I scanned the crowd and found them immediately. Dominic and Fina were standing near the bar. Fina was wearing a dress that was way too small, looking like she was trying too hard to be new money. Dominic was holding a glass of scotch, looking miserable. I walked straight toward them. "Evening, Dominic." "Fina," I said, my voice smooth as silk. Dominic choked on his drink, coughing and sputtering. "Evelyn? How did you get in here?" "I'm the host's guest," I said, tilting my head. "By the way, Dominic, I saw the news. Your architecture license is being reviewed for plagiarism. That must be so embarrassing for you." Fina stepped forward, her face red. "You think you're so special? You're just a temporary toy for Alistair Brain. Once he gets bored of you, you'll be back in the gutter." "At least I won't be in a jail cell," I replied, "which is where Marguerite is headed." "Did you hear?" Dr. Tobias confessed. He told the police everything about the emergency transport plan. Dominic turned white. "What? Tobias talked?" "He sang like a bird," I said, leaning in. "And he mentioned you were the one who promised him a bonus once the estate was settled. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, Dominic. Maybe even attempted murder." I didn't know," Dominic stammered. "That was all Marguerite." "Save it for the judge," I said. Just then, the music stopped. A spotlight hit the grand staircase. Alistair Brain stood there. He looked magnificent in a black tuxedo. He looked strong, healthy, and terrifyingly powerful. He walked down the stairs, his eyes locked onto mine. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He reached me and took my hand, kissing my knuckles right over the giant diamond. "Ladies and gentlemen, Alistair said, his voice amplified by the room's speakers. I have a special announcement. Tonight isn't just about charity. It's about the future of Brain International. I am proud to announce my engagement to the woman who will be leading our design wing into the next decade, my fiancée, Evelyn Alistair. The room erupted in applause. I looked at Dominic and Fina. They looked like they had been turned to stone. But as the crowd cheered, Alistair leaned in to whisper in my ear. His breath was hot, but his hand was trembling against mine. Evelyn, he whispered, so low only I could hear. I need you to lead me to the balcony. I can't feel my left arm. My heart froze. The triumph of the moment vanished. I looked at his face. He was still smiling for the cameras, but his eyes were full of a silent, desperate plea for help. I've got you, I whispered back. Just keep walking. I turned to the crowd, flashing a brilliant, fake smile, and began to lead the most powerful man in the country away from the lights, praying he wouldn't collapse before we reached the shadows. I could feel the heat radiating from Alistair's body, but it was a dry, feverish heat. As we stepped through the heavy glass doors onto the moonlit balcony, the roar of the applause faded into a muffled hum. The cool night air hit us, and Alistair's knees immediately buckled. I caught him, my silk-clad shoulder taking his full weight. I guided him to a stone bench hidden behind a wall of climbing ivy. He slumped against the cold rock, his breath coming in ragged hitches. Alistair, look at me, I whispered, kneeling in front of him. I took his face in my hands. His skin was gray and a thin line of sweat ran down his temple. Is it your heart? Tell me what to do. Inside pocket, he gasped, gesturing weakly toward his tuxedo jacket. The blue vial. I fumbled with his jacket, my fingers trembling. I pulled out a small glass bottle filled with a clear liquid. I unscrewed the cap and held it to his lips. He swallowed it, his eyes closing as he waited for the medicine to work. I'm sorry, he muttered after a minute, his voice sounding like crushed gravel. I didn't want you to see this. Forget the apology, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why are you doing this? You're pushing yourself to the brink of death for a company. Is it worth it? He opened his eyes. The piercing blue was back, though softened by pain. It's not just the company, Evelyn. It's the legacy. And it was for you. I froze. What do you mean, for me? We only met 2 days ago in the rain. Alistair leaned his head back, looking up at the stars. A small, sad smile touched his lips. You don't remember, do you? 7 years ago, the library at the university. I searched my memory, going back to my sophomore year. I remembered the long nights in the architecture wing, but it was all a blur of coffee and blueprints. I was a grad student, Alistair continued, his voice steadying. I was hiding from my mother's expectations even then. I was sitting in a corner booth staring at a business model I couldn't solve. I was ready to quit. Then you sat at the table next to me. I tilted my head, a faint memory of a dark-haired boy in a hoodie flickering in my mind. You didn't say a word to me, Alistair said. But you were working on a model of a bridge. You spent 4 hours trying to get the tension wires just right. You failed 3 times. You cried once, wiped your eyes, and started over. When you finally got it to stand, you did a tiny little victory dance in your seat, packed up, and left. He looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath hitch. I watched you. I thought, if that girl can build a bridge from nothing after failing 3 times, I can solve a merger. I followed your career from a distance, Evelyn. I watched you go to work for Dominic. I watched him dim your light. When I saw him dump you in that boutique, I knew I couldn't let him break the girl who built the bridge. You've been watching me for 7 years? I whispered. Not in a creepy way, he chuckled weakly. I just wanted to see what you'd become. I was disappointed when you chose Halvern, but I figured you knew something I didn't. Then I realized you were just too good to see the bad in him. I looked down at our joined hands. The diamond ring felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just a prop for a contract. It was a symbol of a man who had believed in me longer than I had believed in myself. Alistair, I began, but the sound of the balcony door opening cut me off. So this is where the happy couple is hiding. I stood up quickly, shielding Alistair from view. Standing in the doorway was a woman who looked like she was made of iron and diamonds. She had silver hair styled in a perfect wave and eyes that were even colder than Alistair's. Mother, Alistair said, his voice instantly turning back into the billionaire CEO persona. He used the bench to pull himself to his feet, though I could feel him swaying. Beatrice Vainhart walked toward us, her silk gown hissing against the stone. She didn't look at her son. She looked at me like I was a smudge of dirt on an expensive rug. "So this is the little architect I've heard so much about," Beatrice said. "The one who caused such a scene at the hospital today. Tell me, dear, do you always use violence to get your way, or is that a habit you picked up in the gutter?" "I do whatever is necessary to protect my family," I said, matching her icy tone. "I'm sure you understand that, Mrs. Vainhart." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me. I know my son. He doesn't fall in love. He makes deals. What did he promise you? A wing of a hospital? A fancy title? Because whatever it is, I can double it if you leave tonight and never look back." Alistair stepped forward, placing a firm hand on my waist. "She's not for sale, Mother. And she's not leaving. She's the future of this family." "She's a liability," Beatrice snapped, her composure finally breaking. "The board is already whispering about your health, Alistair. They think you're weak. Marrying a nobody with a scandalous family and a bankrupt father is blood in the water." "Then let them bleed," Alistair said. "Evelyn has more talent in her pinky finger than the rest of the board combined. Now if you'll excuse us, my fiancé needs a dance." Beatrice looked at us for a long moment, her face a mask of fury. "You're making a mistake, Alistair. And you," she turned to me, "don't get too comfortable in that gold dress. Diamonds can be taken back just as easily as they are given." She turned and marched back inside. Alistair let out a long breath and leaned against me. "She's right about one thing," he whispered. "The board is coming for me. Tomorrow is the shareholders' meeting. If I don't look perfect, they'll vote to remove me as CEO." "Then we'll be perfect," I said, turning to face him. "I've spent 5 years making a mediocre man look like a genius. Imagine what I can do for a man who actually is one." I reached out and straightened his bow tie. "Can you dance? Just for 1 minute? We need to go back in there and show them we've already won." Alistair looked at me, and for the first time, the shadow of death seemed to retreat from his face. "For you, Evelyn?" "I could dance for a lifetime." We walked back into the ballroom. The orchestra was playing a slow, sweeping waltz. Alistair took my hand and led me to the center of the floor. The crowd stopped talking. Even Dominic and Fina, who were huddled in a corner, stood frozen as we began to move. Alistair was a perfect dancer, despite his pain. He held me close, his eyes never leaving mine. For those 3 minutes, the villains didn't matter. The money didn't matter. There was only the feeling of his heart beating against my chest, steady, for now. As the music ended, Alistair leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't the fake kiss of a contract. It was desperate and hungry. But as we pulled apart, I saw a flash of red light on Alistair's chest. A tiny, laser dot dancing over his heart. My blood turned to ice. "Alistair, get down!" I lunged at him, throwing my weight into his chest just as the sound of shattering glass echoed through the ballroom. The crystal chandelier above us didn't just shatter. It exploded. Shards of glass rained down like diamond hail, slicing through the air. Screams erupted from every corner of the ballroom as guests scrambled for cover, but I didn't see any of them. I only saw Alistair. I had tackled him hard, sending both of us sprawling onto the polished marble floor just as a bullet whizzed through the space where his head had been a second ago. "Alistair!" I screamed over the chaos. "Are you hit?" He groaned, rolling onto his side. His face was white, and a jagged piece of glass had cut his cheek, but his eyes were clear. I'm okay. You saved me, Evelyn." Before I could breathe a sigh of relief, Thaddeus and the security team swarmed us, forming a human shield. The shooter was in the North Gallery. Thaddeus yelled into his radio, "Lock down the building. No one leaves." In the panic, I saw 2 figures trying to slip through the side exit. Even with a room full of smoke and screaming people, I recognized that cheap red dress. Fina. And right behind her, looking like he was about to throw up, was Dominic. "They're leaving," I pointed, but Thaddeus was already focused on getting Alistair to safety. "Let them go for now," Alistair gasped, clutching his chest. The adrenaline of the attack was fading, and his heart was clearly struggling again. "Drake, get the car. We need to get back to the hotel." An hour later, we were in the safety of Alistair's private penthouse. The city was crawling with police, but inside, it was quiet. A private doctor had already patched up Alistair's cheek and given him a sedative. I was sitting on the edge of the velvet sofa, still wearing my gold dress, though it was now torn and stained with dust. I was shaking. Not from the shooter, but from the realization of how close I had come to losing the only person who actually saw me. "Evelyn," Alistair called softly from the armchair. "Come here." I walked over, and he took my hands. "The shooter wasn't a professional," he said. "The police found the rifle. It was registered to a shell company owned by a man named Reginald, one of Dominic's business associates." "Dominic tried to kill you?" I whispered, the horror sinking in. "He's that desperate?" "Not Dominic," Alistair said. "Dominic doesn't have the guts. It was Marguerite. She's using the last of her stolen funds to try and clear the path. If I die, the engagement is void, and she thinks she can bully you back into silence." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. It was a video file. I pressed play. The video was grainy, taken from a security camera in a hallway. I realized it was the hallway of the very boutique where Dominic had dumped me. The timestamp was from earlier that day. In the video, Fina was standing at the counter, shouting at the clerk. She was holding her stomach, but then she did something that made me gasp. She reached into her dress and adjusted something. A second later, she pulled out a flesh-colored silicone pad, a fake belly. She wasn't pregnant. She never was. "Alistair, look at this," I said, my voice trembling with rage. He watched the video, his jaw tightening. "She lied to him to get the proposal, and she lied to you to break your heart." "She didn't just lie," I said, a cold, hard feeling settling in my stomach. "She used a fake pregnancy to steal my life, and Dominic was too stupid and too greedy to check." "What do you want to do?" Alistair asked. "I want to go to their engagement brunch tomorrow," I said. "I want to show Dominic exactly what he traded me for." The next morning, the Halvern estate, my father's house, was decorated with pink and blue balloons. It was a gender reveal brunch. The irony made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. Dominic had invited the local press, hoping to use the happy family image to distract from his plagiarism scandal. I arrived in a sleek black car, wearing a white suit that made me look like $1 million. I didn't bring security. I didn't need it. I had the truth. I walked into the garden just as Dominic was about to pop a large black balloon filled with confetti. "Stop!" I called out. The music died. 50 guests turned to look at me. Dominic froze, the needle in his hand shaking. Fina, standing next to him in a floral maternity dress, turned pale. "Evelyn?" Dominic hissed. "I told you to stay away. This is a private family event." "I just came to bring a gift," I said, walking toward the stage. I held up a tablet. "I noticed you were having a gender reveal, and I thought I'd save you the trouble of guessing." "Get out of here!" Fina screamed, lunging for the tablet. "Security! Throw her out!" But I was faster. I hit the cast button on the tablet, and the giant LED screen behind the stage, the one meant to show the baby's ultrasound, flickered to life. It wasn't an ultrasound. It was the video of Fina in the boutique, pulling the silicone belly out of her dress. The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the wind rustling the rose bushes. Dominic stared at the screen, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the screen, then at Fina's stomach, then back at the screen. "Fina?" he whispered. "What is that?" It's not what it looks like," Fina stammered, backing away. "She faked the video, Dominic. She's trying to tear us apart because she's jealous." "The video has a digital timestamp, Dominic," I said, stepping onto the stage. "And I have the receipts from the fake belly website she used. She's been charging them to your corporate credit card." Dominic turned to Fina, his face turning a deep, angry purple. You trapped me? I lost everything for you. I lost the brain contract. I lost my reputation. And there isn't even a baby." "Dominic, honey, listen." Fina reached for him. "Don't touch me," he roared. He reached out and grabbed the fabric of her dress, pulling it tight, and cut him. The outline of the foam pad was obvious now. He ripped the Velcro straps, and the fake belly fell to the grass with a dull thud. The guests gasped. Someone started laughing. The paparazzi were clicking their cameras like crazy. This was the end of the Halvern name. I looked at Dominic, who was now crying. Actual tears of humiliation. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Evelyn? I'm so sorry. I was a fool. Please, can we talk? I'll give the house back. I'll do anything. It's too late for sorry, Dominic, I said. You didn't just leave me. You mocked my dying father. You tried to throw me in the trash. And as for the house, you don't own it anymore. I pulled a document from my pocket. Alistair Brain bought the mortgage from the bank this morning. This house is now the Edmund Alistair Foundation for Heart Research. You have 10 minutes to get your things before the movers arrive to take them to the dump. Where am I supposed to go? Fina wailed, looking at the fake belly on the ground. I hear tents are very affordable this time of year, I said, repeating her own words back to her. I walked away, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I had been carrying for 5 years. But as I reached the gate, I saw Alistair's car waiting. Drake was standing outside and his face was grim. Miss Alistair, he said, you need to come to the hospital. Now. What happened? I felt my heart drop. My father? No, Drake said. It's Mr. Brain. He collapsed at the shareholders' meeting. He's in surgery. His heart. It stopped, Evelyn. The world blurred. I jumped into the car, the victory of the morning turning into ashes in my mouth. I had my revenge, but I realized in that moment that I would give it all back. The house, the money, the career, just to hear Alistair's heartbeat one more time. The hallway outside the intensive care unit felt like a tunnel of ice. The hospital smells, bleach, latex, and medicine, usually reminded me of my father's recovery, but tonight, they felt like the smell of death. I paced the linoleum floor in my white suit, now wrinkled and stained with my own tears. Alistair had been in surgery for 4 hours. 4 hours since his heart had decided it couldn't carry the weight of his secrets anymore. Evelyn, sit down. You're going to collapse, Drake said softly. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes red. Even the ever-composed Drake looked like he was at his breaking point. I can't sit, I whispered. Every time I close my eyes, I see that red laser dot on his chest. I see him pale and shaking on the balcony. He was dying right in front of me, and I was too busy celebrating my revenge to notice. He didn't want you to notice, Drake replied. He wanted you to have your moment. That was his gift to you. Before I could respond, the double doors of the surgical wings swung open. A surgeon walked out, pulling off his mask. He looked exhausted. Is he? I couldn't even finish the sentence. He's alive, the surgeon said, and the air finally rushed back into my lungs. But it was close. His heart is severely weakened. He survived the surgery, but the next 48 hours are critical. He needs absolute peace. No stress, no visitors except family. I'm his fiancée, I said immediately. Then you can see him for 5 minutes, the doctor said. I stepped into the room. Alistair looked tiny amidst the hum of the machines and the tangle of wires. His chest rose and fell with the help of a ventilator. I took his hand, it was cold, so cold, and pressed it to my cheek. Don't you dare leave me, Alistair Brain, I sobbed. We haven't even had our real first date yet. While Alistair fought for his life, the world outside was exploding. With Alistair in a coma, the wolves he had warned me about were circling. I was back at the office the next morning, fueled by nothing but black coffee and rage. Cressida met me at the door, her face grim. Beatrice is in the boardroom, she whispered. She's brought Reginald and the rest of the major shareholders. They are filing an emergency motion to declare Alistair incapacitated. They want to appoint Beatrice as interim CEO. Over my dead body, I said. I marched into the boardroom. Beatrice was sitting in Alistair's chair, looking like a queen on her throne. Reginald, the man whose company was linked to the shooter, was sitting to her right, smirking. You're late, dear, Beatrice said, not even looking up from her papers. But it doesn't matter. We are just finalizing the vote. As Alistair's mother, I am taking control of the Brain estate. You're taking nothing, I said, slamming my tablet onto the table. Alistair signed a secondary power of attorney 2 days ago. In the event of his medical emergency, I have full voting rights for his shares. Beatrice laughed. A piece of paper? He was under duress. He wasn't thinking clearly. Besides, who would believe a girl like you? You're probably the one who poisoned him. I didn't poison him, Beatrice, I said, leaning over the table until I was inches from her face. But, let's talk about who tried to shoot him. Reginald, how is the North Gallery this time of year? Reginald's smirk vanished. I don't know what you're talking about. The police traced the rifle, I said, and this morning, Drake found something even better. A series of encrypted payments from a shell company called Ophelia Holdings to a hitman for hire on the dark web. I looked at Beatrice. Ophelia Holdings, that's Marguerite's alias. But Marguerite is broke, she couldn't afford a professional hitman. So I wondered, who provided the funds? Who stood to gain the most if Alistair died before we actually got married? I flipped the screen of my tablet. It showed a bank transfer record. It seems Reginald here wasn't just Dominic's friend. He's been your silent partner for years, Beatrice. You were going to kill your own son to keep the company from falling into the hands of a nobody like me. The room went silent. The other shareholders looked at Beatrice in horror. That's a lie, Beatrice screamed, standing up. You're framing me. The police are in the lobby, Beatrice, I said. They have the shooter in custody. He's already started talking. He said the lady with the silver hair promised him $1 million to finish the job tonight in the hospital. Beatrice turned to Reginald, her eyes wide with panic. You said he wouldn't talk. So you admit it, I said. The doors burst open. It wasn't just the police, it was Alistair's head of security, Thaddeus, and 3 officers. Beatrice Vainhart, Reginald Thawne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. As they were led out in handcuffs, Beatrice looked at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You think you've won? He's still going to die, Evelyn, and when he does, you'll have nothing. I ran back to the hospital, my heart pounding. I had saved the company, but Beatrice's words were haunting me. He's still going to die. When I reached his room, the machines were beeping frantically. Doctors were rushing in. What's happening? I cried. But a nurse pushed me back. His heart rate is bottoming out. We need to shock him. I stood behind the glass, watching as they pressed the paddles to Alistair's chest. His body jolted. Once. Twice. Come on, Alistair, I whispered, my forehead pressed against the cold glass. Fight. You told me you knew everything about me. You know I don't give up. So you can't give up either. Suddenly, the flat line on the monitor jumped. A spike. Then another. We have a pulse, the doctor breathed. I sank to the floor, sobbing with relief. He was a fighter. Hours later, the sun began to rise over the city. I was sitting by his bed holding his hand when I felt a slight pressure. I looked up. Alistair's eyes were open, just a crack. He looked at me, and though he couldn't speak through the tube, he gave my hand a tiny, weak squeeze. I leaned in and kissed his forehead. Beatrice is gone, Alistair. The company is safe. Your mother is in jail. You just have to get better now. He closed his eyes again, but this time, he looked peaceful. But as I sat there, my phone buzzed again. It was Drake. Evelyn, we have a problem, Drake said. His voice sounded like he had seen a ghost. We were processing Marguerite's files at the house. We found a birth certificate. A real one. For who? I asked. For you, Evelyn, Drake said. Edmund Alistair isn't your biological father, and the man listed as your father, he's still alive, and he's the one who's been funding Marguerite's legal team from the shadows. I looked at the man in the bed, then at the phone in my hand. The mystery of my life was just beginning. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hallway felt like needles in my eyes. Alistair was finally stable, his chest rising and falling in a rhythmic, mechanical hum, but the world outside his room was spinning out of control. I looked at the birth certificate in my hand. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ghost from a past I never knew existed. My eyes skipped over my own name and landed on the section for father. It didn't say Edmund Alistair. It said Thaddeus Vainhart. I dropped the paper onto the small plastic table in the waiting room. My breath hitched. Vainhart. The same last name as Alistair. The same last name as Beatrice. Drake, I whispered, my voice cracking. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me Marguerite forged this to mess with my head. Drake stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the rising sun. We ran the DNA against a sample from your father's, Edmund's, medical records. There is no match, Evelyn. Edmund isn't your biological father, but Thaddeus Vainhart. He was Alistair's uncle, the black sheep of the family who disappeared 25 years ago. I felt sick. So Alistair and I were cousins? No, Drake said, turning around. Thaddeus was adopted into the Vainhart family. There is no blood relation to Alistair. But it means you have a claim, Evelyn. A massive one. Thaddeus was the original heir to the Vainhart fortune before Beatrice framed him for embezzlement to take the company for herself. Suddenly, the heavy doors at the end of the hall swung open. A man walked in. He wasn't wearing a hospital gown or a suit. He wore a simple, rugged canvas jacket and had a face that looked like a roadmap of pain and survival. His eyes were a startling, familiar shade of hazel. "My eyes." "Evelyn," the man said. His voice was deep, echoing with a decade of silence. "Who are you?" I demanded, backing away until I hit the glass of Alistair's ICU room. "My name is Thaddeus," he said, stopping several feet away. "But your mother called me Teddy. I didn't fund Marguerite because I wanted to hurt you. I funded her because she told me you were in trouble. She told me Edmund was hurting you and that you needed a way out." "You've been gone for 25 years?" I shouted, tears hot and angry on my face. "Marguerite didn't save me. She ruined me. She stole my home. She tried to kill my—" I gestured toward Alistair. "She tried to kill the man I love." Thaddeus looked at the man behind the glass, then back at me. "I know. I realized too late that Marguerite was the same snake she was when we were young. She played us both, Evelyn. She told me you were dead years ago so I wouldn't come looking for you." I looked at this stranger, this father, who had appeared out of the shadows of a conspiracy. "Why now? Why come here today?" "Because Beatrice is in jail," Thaddeus said, a cold spark of justice in his eyes. "The woman who destroyed my life and stole your heritage is finally behind bars. I'm here to give you the evidence you need to finish her, and to tell you that you don't have to fight alone anymore." He handed me a small, encrypted flash drive. "Everything is on here. The proof that Beatrice murdered Alistair's father. The proof that she's been draining Brain International to fund her own private island. And the proof that you are the legal owner of the Vainhart estate." My head was pounding. I looked at the flash drive, then at Alistair. He was still in a coma, oblivious to the fact that his nobody fiancé was actually the rightful owner of his family's legacy. The next 24 hours were a blur of lawyers and depositions. With the evidence from Thaddeus, the case against Beatrice was airtight. She wasn't just going away for conspiracy, she was going away for life. But while the legal battle was being won, the medical battle was reaching a breaking point. I was sitting by Alistair's bed, holding his hand, when his fingers suddenly twitched, not a small reflex, but a purposeful grip. "Alistair?" I leaned in close. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully he opened them. He looked around the room, confused, his gaze finally landing on me. He tried to speak, but the ventilator tube made it impossible. He looked panicked. "Shh, don't try to talk," I said, stroking his hair. "The surgery was a success. You're safe. Your mother can't hurt you anymore. And I found my father." Alistair's eyes widened. He looked at the man standing in the doorway, Thaddeus. A look of recognition passed between them. Alistair reached out a hand, and Thaddeus took it. "I'm sorry it took so long, Alistair," Thaddeus whispered. "I'm here now. I'll look after her while you rest." Alistair nodded weakly, his eyes turning back to me. He reached up and touched the diamond ring on my finger, then pointed the pen and paper on the bedside table. I handed them to him. With a shaking hand, he scribbled 3 words. "Marry me. Today." I laughed through my tears. "Alistair, you're in the ICU. You have tubes in your chest." He frowned and wrote again, harder this time. "Today." I looked at Drake and Thaddeus. They both nodded. "If that's what the boss wants," Drake said, picking up his phone. "I'll call the chaplain." The ceremony was the shortest and most beautiful wedding in the history of the city. There were no flowers, no silk dresses, and no vanilla cake. There were just the beeping of heart monitors and the smell of antiseptic. I wore my white suit, now cleaned and pressed. Alistair sat up as much as he could, his eyes bright with a feverish kind of love. "Do you, Alistair Brain, take Evelyn Alistair to be your wife?" the chaplain asked. Alistair couldn't speak, but he looked the chaplain in the eye and nodded with more strength than I thought he had left. "And do you, Evelyn, take Alistair?" "I do," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. "In every life, in every world, I do." As we were declared husband and wife, a nurse rushed in, looking frantic. "Miss Alistair, I mean, Mrs. Brain, you need to see the news." She turned on the television in the room. The headline was scrolling across the bottom. Dominic Halvern and Finna Alistair arrested in attempted border crossing. The footage showed Dominic and Finna being pulled out of a dusty old truck at the border. They looked haggard, dirty, and terrified. Dominic was screaming about how it was all Fina's fault, while Fina was trying to hide her face from the cameras. I looked at Alistair. He was smiling, a real genuine smile. "They're gone," I whispered. "It's over." But just as the relief washed over me, Alistair's grip on my hand loosened. His head fell back against the pillow. "Alistair!" I screamed. The heart monitor let out a long, continuous beep. The flatline. "Clear," the doctors shouted, rushing back into the room. I was pushed out into the hallway, the world turning black at the edges. I had just become his wife, and in the same breath, I was losing him. I stood there, clutching my wedding ring, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Please. Not today. Not like this." The silence following the long, high-pitched scream of the heart monitor was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. I was frozen in the hallway, my hands pressed against the glass. Inside, the doctors were a blur of blue scrubs and silver paddles. "Clear." Alistair's body jolted. The flat line stayed flat. "Increased to 300. Clear." Again, his chest heaved, but the monitor remained a mocking, steady green line. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Thaddeus, my father, stood there with tears in his eyes. He didn't say a word, but his grip was firm. Then, a miracle happened. A single, jagged blip appeared on the screen. Then another. The steady drone broke into a slow, rhythmic thump. Thump, thump. "We have a rhythm," the surgeon exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. I collapsed against the wall, my legs giving out. He was still here. 2 months later. The sun was shining over the city, but it felt different now. It didn't feel like a cold, hard place of business and betrayal. It felt like home. I stood in the garden of the Alistair estate, the house I had grown up in, the one Dominic had tried to steal. It was no longer a place of sadness. The Edmund Alistair Foundation sign was being bolted onto the front gate. My father, Edmund, was sitting in a wheelchair on the porch, his color back, laughing as he talked to Thaddeus. It was strange seeing my two fathers together, but they had become fast friends, bonded by their shared goal, making sure I was happy. A car pulled up the driveway. Not a limousine, but a comfortable, sleek SUV. Alistair stepped out. He wasn't using a cane anymore, though he moved with a new, careful grace. He looked at the house, then at me, and his smile was the only thing I needed to see to know the world was right. "The board meeting went well?" I asked, walking over to meet him. "They voted unanimously," Alistair said, pulling me into his arms. "The Veinhart and Brain merger is official. And since my wife happens to be the majority shareholder of the Veinhart side, I think my job is pretty secure." "I might fire you if you don't take your vitamins," I teased, leaning my head against his shoulder. He laughed, a deep, healthy sound. "I think I can live with those terms." The closure came later that afternoon, in the form of a legal brief from Drake. Ophelia had been sentenced to 20 years for bigamy, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Without her merger money, her lawyers had abandoned her, and she was left with nothing but the orange jumpsuit she wore in a state prison. Dominic and Fina had fared even worse. Because Dominic had used his company's client funds to pay for his lavish lifestyle and Fina's fake pregnancy, he was facing federal charges for embezzlement. Every asset he owned was seized. The last the tabloids saw of them, they were living in a rundown motel on the edge of the state, waiting for their trial. Dominic's professional license was gone, and Fina's reputation was so toxic that even her own mother wouldn't take her calls. That evening, Alistair and I sat on the balcony of our new home. We weren't hiding anymore. There were no cameras, no wolves, and no contracts. Alistair took a small box out of his pocket. He took my hand, the one already wearing the heavy diamond from our contract, and slipped a second band next to it. It was a simple, elegant ring made of platinum, with a small bridge engraved on the inside. "The contract is over, Evelyn," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I don't need a wife to keep the board away anymore. I don't need a partner to hide my illness. I just want you, because you're the girl who builds bridges, and I want to spend the rest of my life crossing them with you." "Is this a second proposal?" I asked, my eyes misty. "No," he said, kissing my hand. "This is the final vow." I looked out over the city. I had lost a fiancé, a home, and my security in a single day. But in their place, I had found my true father, my true purpose, and a man who loved me for the strength I never knew I had. I wasn't the betrayed fiancé anymore. I was Evelyn Brain. and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be.